Great, great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm sure all of you, if you ate any of your donuts, you're wide awake. And I should expect the crash in about 30 minutes from your sugar high. So there we go. So my talk is called Becoming Network Nonprofits, Leading on Social Platforms. So we're going to take a look at what your association can learn from the network nonprofit model. We're going to hear some stories and wisdom from your community, and you're going to see some examples and best practices from other types of organizations where the lessons are transferable. So a little bit about me. I've worked in the nonprofit sector about 35 years, and about 25 years ago, I had a front row seat at the creation of a field. How nonprofits can use the internet for mission-driven work. And I got my first job for this network of online artists called ArtsWire. And I admitted to them at the job interview that I didn't know a modem from a microwave. But what I did have was passion for teaching and learning about this new technology, what it could do for nonprofits. And this has literally carried me around the world, working with thousands of nonprofits and social change activists on how to use these tools. So in 2009, I got an invitation from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation to be visiting scholar, and I had an opportunity to write these two books, The Network Nonprofit and Measuring the Network Nonprofit, which won the Terry McAdam Nonprofit Book Award. And I thought, wow, okay, that's the highlight of my career. I never thought in a million years that Conan O'Brien would be talking about me and my red hat, there it is, in case you're wondering, on his program. And the reason he was talking about me is because I had more LinkedIn followers than he did. So let me show you a little bit of the clip, okay?
I have a lot of followers. I have followers on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and YouTube, okay? But there's one piece missing from my social media empire. I'm talking about LinkedIn, okay? Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what LinkedIn is. I have no idea. I asked around, it has something to do with business, I think, okay? But when I found out that I didn't have a presence on LinkedIn, I was outraged. I was freaked out. I want to rule LinkedIn. I want to be the king of LinkedIn, even if I don't know what it all is about.
You don't have to know in order to rule it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what I did is I created a LinkedIn profile, okay? There I am, I'm dressed to go clubbing in Germany. All ready to go. And then I noticed that other people on LinkedIn, other business leaders, they post pictures of themselves sometimes with a world leader to sort of up their ante, make themselves seem more important. For example, the founder of Craigslist, Craig Newmark, posted a profile photo of himself with President Obama. Okay? Big deal. Here's what I did. I put up something even better. This is a picture of me with former presidents Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Teddy Roosevelt. And check this out. We're all standing in the palm of Pope Francis. True story, kids. So far, I've amassed over 75,000 followers, and I've now been deemed something, this is real, called a LinkedIn influencer. That's right. Just the other day, I passed GE Chairman Jeff Immelt. He was my old boss at NBC. So we're on our way to the top. But I deserve more followers, and I will have them. I will. Look at some of the people with more followers than I, okay? Check it out. This guy, David Evans, has almost 80,000 followers. He calls himself Cisco's chief futurist. I'm sorry, I thought my job was bullshit. What the heck? What's a futurist?
I don't know.
Do you know what a futurist is?
Yeah,
I'm a futurist. Do you know the future? No. Yeah, and when there's this woman, Beth Kanter, she has over 125,000 followers, which is very hot. She borrowed from Macho Man Randy Savage. And she has more followers than I do. It's absurd. Well, guess what? Me and the presidents can wear gaudy red hats too. There we go. I want to climb to the top of the LinkedIn pile, so if you're near a computer or you can get to a computer, please join LinkedIn by going to teamcoco.com/LinkedIn and follow me. Okay, this will help feed. Yes. That's what it's all about. Yeah. All right.
Okay. So I gave Conant some advice, okay? It's not about the red hat. It's not about how many followers you have on LinkedIn or any other social platform. It's about being socially present. It's about engaging with your community. And it's inspiring them to take action, whatever action you need them to take to realize your mission. It's not about the red hat. And of course, he ignored me, and I still have more followers than he does. So how and why is this possible that an individual like me can have more influence than a celebrity talk show host? Well, it has to do with 3 digital revolutions that have been taking place over the last 10 years, and I probably don't have to describe them to people in this room. We know what they are. They are, all right, broadband, mobile, and social networks. So broadband. In the old days, using the internet used to be like watching paint dry, remember? But now we have fast access at work and at home. So more and more we are conducting our lives through the internet. Think about it. Work, school, your kids, your banking, it's online. Mobile, we have the power in the palm of our hands, to conduct our lives. It's somewhere like 92% of Americans are using mobile phones. And in America, they're connected to the internet. They're called smartphones, not dumb phones. And what are they doing on them? They're accessing social networks. And what network? Facebook. 75% of Americans use at least one social network, and that tends to be Facebook, at least in the US. So these 3 digital revolutions are causing a change in the way that nonprofits do their work and allow things like this to happen. Sir Stuffington. You knew I was going to put a cat or a dog up here. It is social media. Okay, so Sir Stuffington. Let me tell you about Sir Stuffington. He was found in an alleyway in Portland, Oregon, with his eye scratched out by a raccoon and his jaw broken. And a young woman who was very connected scooped him up, brought him to the local animal shelter, and then went home and created a Facebook page. And within 24 hours, had over almost 40,000 people liking her page. Now, the reason she did this is that she deeply cared about animal welfare. She was passionate about it, and she wanted more people to care about animals like Sir Stuffington, and to make donations to the local shelter, to come in and volunteer, and to come and adopt pets like Sir Stuffington. Now, the interesting thing about this campaign is that the animal shelter had nothing to do with it. It was done to them. So this is the change that we're talking about in terms of nonprofits in a connected world, network nonprofits. So let's look at the old way of working. And this is a little bit of an exaggeration. We have staff behind the firewall, in their silos, in their departments, behind the institution, which is not very transparent, working in isolation to reach a social change goal. And that is what needs to change, and it is changing, to something that looks like this, to more of a network nonprofit. Now, the definition of a network nonprofit, as I've defined it in my book, is simple, agile, transparent organizations that allow insiders to get out and outsiders to get in. And that they're experts at using networks, social media, and data to realize their missions. So what do we have in this model? We have the staff behind the firewall, but they're working across teams, not in silos. They're leveraging their professional networks online. The institution is becoming a little bit more transparent, more porous, allowing these insiders to get out and collectively work with groups of people and other organizations collectively marching towards social impact. Okay, but we know that going from something like this to something like that isn't as easy as clicking a button. Okay, it's about change. And in all of my work with nonprofits over the last number of years, change happens slowly. Think about it when you decide to make a personal change in your life. I'm going to start walking, and I'm going to get a Fitbit, and I'm going to try and get 10,000 steps. It takes a while for you to begin to change, but think of it within an organization. Change happens slow. So I was inspired by this Martin Luther King quote, which goes, if you can't fly, then run, and if you can't run, then walk, and if you can't walk, then crawl, but you have to keep taking one incremental step forward at a time. So I created a maturity of practice model called Crawl, Walk, Run, Fly, that's based on 15 different best practices of being a network nonprofit and what they look like at the different developmental stages. So let's take a look at that. So at the crawling stage, you have probably a nonprofit that needs some work on its communications strategy, maybe to be more strategic in integrating social media. They need to develop this sort of network mindset and muscle, not just think about it, but actually do it. Some culture change, a social media policy, and maybe the brand is on social, but the employees may be on it, but not officially using it strategically for the brand strategy. So that's at the crawling stage. At the walking stage, you're beginning to link social with results and networks. They are piloting different campaigns or different programs and doing a lot of learning within that particular area. There's incremental capacity being built, up to 20 hours a week of staff time. And when I say staff time, that's not a full 20-hour position. It may be integrated into other people's jobs. The leader and employees use social, but there's no strategy linkage to the brand. At the running stage, for their brand strategy, they have a ladder of engagement. They know how to bring their supporters from passive observers on up to champions for their cause. And they know each of those incremental stages, and they have metrics for conversion. And they have a robust content strategy, and I understand there's going to be a session this afternoon just on that topic, very important. And they also use informal champions, both within the organization, staff, CEO, board, as well as external champions, their members, their donors, and other stakeholders. They're constantly playing with best practices and new technologies that come along. And when I say playing, they start with a pilot. And they start with the goal of learning and seeing, how does this work and how does it help our mission? And doing some measurement and learning and all of the above. To get to the flying stage, they are building networks, both institutional networks as well as leveraging professional networks. They are also working with a formal champions program. There is a formal strategy to make where staff can actually be ambassadors for the organization on social, as well as other champions. They have multi-channel engagement. It's not just social media, it's also mobile, it's email, it's print, it's linking face-to-face events with the digital. And there is an institutional reflection and continuous improvement process. So we have crawl, walk, run, fly. And so what I'd like you to do is to take a moment, I want you to do a share pair. Everyone know what a share pair is? A share pair is when you talk to somebody next to you or behind you, and I want you to discuss, where do you think your association is? Are you a crawl, walk, run, fly? And what is it that you need to improve to get to that next stage? And what I'm going to do is flip back the slide so you see the model, and pair up with somebody. And when you hear me ring the bell, you can stop talking. So go. Okay, I can always tell how long, if you're engaged. Hopefully, maybe it's the donut sugar high. By how long it takes me to pull you back. Great. So hopefully you got a chance to talk to some of your colleagues. And as was mentioned, I did a little research and I did a little interviewing before I prepared this keynote. And I talked to a couple members of your community, a couple associations. And I want to tell a couple campfire stories, and I'm going to actually invite them up on stage to interview them and hear about where they are in terms of crawl, walk, run, fly. So I'd like to bring up the bug people, the Entomological Society of America, David Gammel. He told me that he wasn't able to pronounce it at first. So come on up. Society for American Military Engineers, Marc, Bialek. And the Association for Women in Science, Meredith, Gibson. Whoops. Is that going to give feedback? Okay, so maybe I'll use this. Is this on now? Okay. Maybe you need to turn off my wireless. Okay, got it. I was afraid that was going to happen. And I need okay, I'm so glad you all gave them applause, because when they said, I'm gonna make the people formerly called the audience, they're gonna be part of the keynote. And that's sort of one of the shifts that you need to make in social media. So, so David, just give me the 15-second overview of your association.
Oh, okay. We're the Entomological Society of America. We have about 7,000 members, and they study insects. So that's agriculture, public health, conservation, biodiversity, biology.
And you're considered a large association.
Well, we're 14 staff, about $3.5 million budget, so we're the smaller end of the range.
Okay, that's great. So tell me, why does your association use social media? What are your objectives?
Well, all of our student and early career folks are using it, and then a lot of people that are further along in their career are using it. The ones that work in agriculture, they're often universities that are doing the extension function, where part of their job is to do outreach to the communities they serve with their research. So it's very natural, and they're very early adopters of social media, because most of them are using that as part of their outreach, so we have to be out there interacting with them as well.
So you're using this for community engagement, and do you have some business goals?
Yeah, they support them. When we talked earlier, I said, well, we don't have like a content strategy, but we do have, we use social media a lot around our annual meeting, and we're using it more and more around our public policy agenda, and then just to interact and help share the stuff our members share that wow them. So, like that Death Star image, lots of our members are sharing that too. They're sharing a lot of Pluto stuff because they get jazzed by science, even though they're working at a smaller scale with the little insects.
So humor works with your community?
Yeah, they're entomologists are a deeply silly people.
Okay. So yes, so while I was looking through your website and all your social media, I noticed that you have that it's kind of baked into everything you do.
Yeah.
And including your annual conference. And so you tell us a little bit about how it's incorporated into your annual conference, into the live event.
We have our meetings team and our other staff run a great contest for like a hashtag contest and other ways for them to participate in social media, to give out awards. So we really build it in. You see the image there, that's a waterfall, roll-up tweets and other things that are posted online by our attendees.
And I heard that you don't moderate that.
Well, we started out moderating it, but it was going so fast, even though we had 3 people checking in on it, we just had to turn the moderation off and hope for the best. But
so did anything bad happen?
Yes, but but it's not something we would filter. We had someone had a bad interaction with another attendee that was basically sexual harassment, and so people started talking about that online, and that was showing up on our Twitter wall there at the meeting, and so we had to get engaged with that. And Rosina Romano had a session yesterday talking about that.
And so that resulted in having a formal strategy policy for online conduct?
Yeah, and actually the year before, a really bad series of events happened at a conference called Science Online, I think, and a lot of our members were talking about that. And one of them happened to be the co-chair of our annual meeting the following year, so she chatted with us about putting together a policy, which we had in place. And as Rosina said yesterday, I thought, all right, job done, that's great. And then we had this event happen. But I feel so happy that we were a little bit ahead of it, so that when this started happening, we were able to engage that policy and get people connected up to file complaints, and then we dealt with it. And I think that helped tamp down the talk online, because if we had been non-responsive and not listening, this could have just spun out of control and really damaged our reputation.
So trust is, in a sense, cheaper than control, and it's important to have the backup of the policy and the engagement around it. And finally, I want to ask, I noticed that you're on Twitter. I mean, you're CEO of a association. I mean, why do you do this?
Well, I was on Twitter before I got this job, so I just kept using that account and started following as many entomologists as I could. And for me, it's just a great way to sort of keep in touch with what they're talking about. One time I was sitting in a hotel waiting for my room to get ready and got onto Twitter and saw what our members were talking about, and they're talking about some technical issue around grants and grant applications, and none of them could answer it. So I just jumped in and said, "Hey, you want us to do a webinar on this?" And they said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So that's when we get in touch with them, and about a month later we had a professional development webinar on that topic. So that's just one very small example.
That's great. So leveraging your personal brand in service of your job and in your organization's mission. Any advice you want to give to folks out here?
I would just follow on Twitter as many of your members as you can, or people that you want to have be your members. And for me, it's my great source of intelligence day to day, just to see what's bubbling around. And that keeps me in touch with them, even if I don't see one for a few weeks.
That's great. Let's give him a hand. So next we have the Society of American Military Engineers, and we have Marc, Bialek. And if you could give me the 15-second overview of your association.
Sure, we have about 30,000 members, and we're a hub of bringing military engineers working in the Department of Defense with AUC private industry firms.
That's great. Are you considered small, medium, or large association?
Our membership is pretty decent size, but we are probably a small association, small staff, about $6 million revenue budget.
Right. So why would your association use social media to reach military engineers? Why would you bother?
We use it really to maintain relevance with our younger members. We're striving to get more young members involved, students and people under 39, 35 years old, and I think
So they're a little different, huh?
yes.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, the military is not really super involved in social media, so it's always kind of a struggle. And we actually have about a third of our members using social media on our LinkedIn account, and that's pretty impressive since they can't use and access most of the social media tools from their work computers on a daily basis.
So tell us a little bit about your use of LinkedIn.
We try to do it pretty, we let it go, we let it flow. We don't really moderate too much ourselves.
You don't moderate it?
I mean, we do moderate it, but we don't moderate. I mean, we do have one staff who moderates it, but it's for really pointing out the things that are not appropriate for LinkedIn accounts.
And you also involve your members as community managers, sort of extending your capacity?
Yes, if somebody has a really good discussion or conversation, we try to highlight them and we try to ask them to do more of that. And then we actually highlight that in our magazine, good conversations and good discussions.
Right, so not only what happens on LinkedIn just doesn't stay on LinkedIn, it's also being summarized and brought out through your content strategy.
Yeah, we try to leverage it.
So what's your advice to everyone in the room about associations, use of social media, leading on social platforms?
As a group that's in the crawl to walk phase, I think I would put us. With a small staff, I think that you really need to try to find people who love social media and try to leverage them, because for staff, we only have about an hour a day, a couple of us to work on it, so it's good for our members to get involved.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's give them a hand. So now we have Meredith from the Association of Women in Science. And so tell us a little bit of the 15-second overview of your association.
Sure. The Association for Women in Science is for both women and men. We are multidisciplinary across science, math, engineering, and technology, and our goal is to promote full participation for women across all disciplines and all employment sectors.
So are you a small, medium, or large association?
We're small staff. We have 8 staff. Our reach is about 20,000.
Oh, great. So what is your objective or strategy for using social media? Why do you use it?
We would like to help lead the conversation in policy, on the news, and promoting the achievements of women throughout STEM.
So you take sort of a content curation, thought leadership strategy when it comes to social media.
Yes.
That's great. So I understand that you have a one-person communications department, a person working so hard she's not here today, and social media is just one piece of her probably huge job description. So how does your organization allocate time? How does she manage all this?
Well, we just added a half person, so
Yeah.
she's got a little relief.
So let's brought you on to the walking.
Yes. She spends about 3 hours a day. We have an editorial 3 hours a week. We have an editorial calendar so she can map out what she's doing. We have community chapter members that we also ask for content. We try to make sure that our content is brief and relevant, and that we limit our asks so people really notice when we are asking for their participation in something.
So you just had a brilliant success with your Innovation Summit and social media. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We held an Innovation Summit in Washington, D.C., and we had it live streamed. So we had an entire rollout process along with our sort of traditional process of this is the event, we're inviting you, please attend, to register with us, and they became, and be able to see it from your home or your work through the live stream option that was also recorded. And now we have a great prospect list of a much broader group of people than we had before that we can reach.
That's great. There's certainly a return on investment for that in terms of your new prospects. So what is your advice to everyone in the room?
I would say to try to innovate. This is a technology that's somewhat new, it's changing, and you need to experiment a lot, and you need to also try to figure out how you can quantify it. Are you looking for shares? Are you looking for likes? So when you are testing different things, you can compare apples to apples.
That's great. So let's give her a hand. Let's give all of our three and a pretty You can take this off stage. Thank you, and thank you so much. I always feel. That's great. So I'm going to turn this mic off, and I'm assuming the wireless will go back on. Is it working? Yes, it is. Seamless change of AV equipment. Great. So we've heard from your community. You've heard stories and examples and best practices along the continuum of crawl, walk, run, fly from your community, organizations that are similar to yours. Let's see what we can learn from others. So I'm going to cover some tips and best practices on being and doing as a network nonprofit. So the first thing is this whole idea around having a networked mindset or a networked leadership model. And what this is just a leadership style. And this leadership style is shared leadership. Some of you may be familiar with this. There's different styles of leadership. There is directive, command, and control, and then there's shared leadership. And I'm not saying that you need to practice only one style of leadership. The important thing is to understand the different qualities of these leadership styles and to know when to apply the right leadership style. And so when it comes to building networks and social, you need a shared leadership style, which is leadership through active social participation. It's engaging both your organizational and professional networks. It's thinking in networks versus broadcast. And it's also that idea of being open, transparent, and collective action, and of course, learning from experiments. So let me show you an example of this. There we go. So this is Bruce Leslie, and he's the CEO of First Focus. And they are a bipartisan think tank in Washington, D.C., dedicated to making sure that children and families are prioritized in the federal budget. Okay, so they're not an association, but they do have members that are organizations and individuals that care about this topic. They host an annual event, but they also do a lot of advocacy and thought leadership around this topic. And they have a really robust communication strategy for their brand, for their organization that integrates social media. But their CEO also plays a role, Bruce Leslie. And he's one of those people that a few years ago said, Twitter? Isn't that where people talk about what their cat ate for breakfast? Why would I even want to use that? And so his staff sat him down, gave him some training, and what Bruce does is he has to follow all of the issues related to children. and families. He has to keep abreast of that because he does press conferences. He talks with policymakers. He has to be on top of it. So, and he was already following these in a way, but and sending out and sharing links to his members through an email. But they said, look, you can do this much more efficiently on Twitter. So they set him up, and now Bruce comes into the office for 15, 20 minutes every morning with his latte, his iPad, and he has his list of sources of journalists and other experts that are writing about all the topics related to children and families. He scans through those, he picks out the best articles, and he summarizes them and shares them on Twitter. And this has helped build his thought leadership. It also helps him write a weekly blog post for the Huffington Post, which draws attention to the issues. And it's also helping him prepare for whatever press conference or public speaking he's doing on the topic, because he's right on top of it with relevant and breaking news. So but what's more important is that he is feeding his whole network of members. So he works with a national network of statewide and local organizations that are dedicated to improving the lives of children and families. Now, you can see them there. Now, they all work for smaller types of association with very limited staff and time, and they also need to be on social, but they don't have the kind of time that the national organization does to filter and read and come up with all of this content. So Bruce's Twitter feed has turned into this curated list, almost like the AP Newswire, where his members can then retweet and repurpose this content for their state networks. And in fact, they actually collaborate together in testing different content. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a baby with a diaper saying, "Hey, I'm covered," after the ACA passed. And Wendy in Wisconsin tested this on Facebook, measured it, it did really well. But Sally in Colorado, happened to see this and said, "I love that image. Can we use that and share it on our Facebook page? Because I don't have to create stuff from scratch." She said, "Sure." So it was repurposed, and it also did well in Colorado. So they're taking this kind of network approach to not only building awareness around their issue, but also saving time with the content strategy. Okay, so you need to right-size your social media strategy. You need to have a strategy, and then it needs to be right-sized to your capacity. I understand that there's a session this afternoon on developing a social media plan. We'll probably go more into detail about this, but the tip of the iceberg, usually, we think about these tools. But you need to really think about, your audience, who you want to reach, what your objectives are, what your strategies are, and then pick the tools. And it may be that I'm a big advocate of not trying to be on all platforms at once, especially with limited resources, but developing a series of pilots on one platform that is the best match for your audience initially, and then building other platforms in as you go. You don't have to do it all at once. Let me show you a story. This is from the Kearney Street Workshop, which is a small, really small organization in San Francisco. It's an arts organization whose purpose is to showcase work by Asian artists, and they're located in the Chinatown community in San Francisco, and also to educate the community about the work of these artists. They have 2 people on staff, okay, and they do everything in this art center. Social media, they clean the bathrooms, they do everything. And so they decided that they were going to allocate time between people on staff, and they're going to reach out to artists and people in their neighborhood. Their objectives were going to be very focused. They wanted to increase engagement, because engagement was important, and they were going to measure that by if they got 2 more comments per post on Facebook, that would be a success. The other thing they did was a lot of training and workshops as well as exhibitions, and so they wanted to get a 10% increase in attendance at their events. And they would measure this by, they were already doing a survey when people came to events. How did you hear about this? So they just added their social media channels so they could tell whether or not they were actually being effective. One of the things that they learned talking to people in the community was that people didn't quite understand what they were all about. They were kind of puzzled and perplexed by the art. So they decided that their strategy would be, in terms of content, that they would show the human side of their organization. They constantly work to demystify the arts. They decided to work on a small number of tools. They focused on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And they didn't do them all at once, given they have a small staff. They said, we're going to do 6 months and really focus on Facebook, another 6 months on Twitter, and then we'll add Instagram. And we're going to only spend on staff, a couple hours a week doing this. They took a very focused, right-sizing approach to social media. Now, another way that you can increase capacity is do what they have done in Arkansas. Now, Arkansas Advocates for Children is a member of Bruce's network, okay? Now, they're a fairly small organization, a little bit larger than the one I just showed you, maybe 5 or 6 people on staff. And Gerard Matthews is that one-person communications shop. And if you look at that graph, you'll see that blue line, that's the amount of time that Gerard has for his job. Press conferences, doing the social media, doing the annual brochure, organizing events. And that red line, that's his workflow. And his time is constant, but the workflow keeps on going up. So what he's done is started an informal champions program on staff. He has staff either as themselves on social or taking turns managing the branded account. And the reason they do it is, first of all, it expands his capacity. And those that are, like, for example, on Twitter, behind the brand account, they are following the same kind of process that Bruce is, so it's making them smarter at work. So they're making, it's making the organization smarter, and it's also expanding their capacity to do social media. So it's about right-sizing your social media strategy to fit your capacity. Okay, and this one is, when I started talking about this 6 or 7 years ago, I would say, make social media part of everybody's job. There would be a visible gasp in the audience, and I'm glad I didn't hear it yet. So you want to make social media a part of everyone's job. Now, some people are really happy about that, and other people are not so happy about that. Okay, so if you have a larger staff, you have to start with the people who are happy about it and create a culture change within your organization. But the idea here is allowing staff, leveraging their personal passion for whatever your mission is, whether it's bugs, whether it's women in science, whether it's military engineers, in service of your organization's mission. Now let me tell you the story about Rachel. Rachel works for an organization that works on ocean conservation. It's an ocean conservation network, and they work in a really interesting way. They gather data about what people are talking about related to their ocean conservation issues, and they craft their campaigns as conversations. And they follow 6 or 7 different ocean conservation issues, including shark conservation. Now, it's really great because Rachel, who's the communications person, loves sharks. She personally loves sharks. She could spend her whole weekend looking at shark pictures on the internet, or actually going out and looking at them in the ocean. And that's really great because this passion led her to discover this fantastic blog. Now, how many of you are familiar with Tumblr? Tumblr? Okay, so it's a blogging community. Now, I'm not going to say the word, but they have a series of blogs that begin with F, word, yes, F, yeah, and whatever the topic is. I bet you there's an F, yeah, Pluto blog. I'm sure there is. And so she found the F, yeah, Sharks blog, and it had 1 million subscribers. People actively sharing around their love of sharks, okay? Now, what a great match for this ocean conservation organization. So the college students that were running this blog decided that they were graduating and they were moving on to jobs, so they wanted to donate the blog to a nonprofit. And they wanted to donate it to Rachel's nonprofit. So Rachel went into her executive director and said, guess what? We can get 1 million people who care about sharks as part of our internet properties. And the executive director said, that's great. What's the name of the blog? She said, F yeah, Sharks. And so there was this discussion about, do we have swear words in our internet properties? So they worked out a deal where the kids donated the blog to Rachel. No, they didn't donate. She bought it for the price of a pepperoni pizza. And they turned it over to Rachel, and her executive director let her manage the blog at work for a couple hours a week, because they do care about other fish in the ocean. So how can you leverage your staff's personal passion for your mission in service of your organization's strategy. Now, of course, you need to have a social media policy in place. How many of you have a social media policy? Want to raise your hand? Okay, so it shouldn't just be a policy that sits on the shelf or that you took from another colleague and you just did a search and replace on the name. You want to have discussion around this, and you really want to have a section that lays out the do's and don'ts for employee use of social media. Things like, do know the mission, do be positive, do be an advocate, and don'ts like do not swear, don't lie. My mom used to call this common sense. So you want to have this policy, and you want to have people know about it. And as David shared, you might have people violate it, but it's a learning opportunity. So it changes the fear into a smile. Okay, so you need a social media policy, and you also, as the leader, you need to have a social presence. I know this is not going to be very popular sometimes, but it's really important, as we heard from David and others. Now, there's some good benefits to this. There's expanded reach for your organization, because typically the executive director has a slightly different network. There's more trust. Studies show that people trust people more than institutional brands. There's less risk, because your executive director is going to know more about your organization than maybe an outsider would. And there's also some flexibility. Some institutional strategies, are very filled with content and engagement, and sometimes there's breaking news. And there's no room in the channel to get that out, so it can be done through the executive director or other employees. So let me give you an example. This comes from Save the Children. They're not an association, but this is their brand Twitter page. And the audience that they're trying to reach are supporters, donors, and advocates. And this is primarily a goal around engagement and community building. And they have almost 1 million people following them on Twitter. They also have their CEO, Carolyn Miles, who has her own presence. But she has a slightly different objective. She has engagement, but the audience is different. She's reaching out to influencers, journalists, policymakers, and world leaders. There's a lot of world leaders on Twitter, and Save the Children interacts with them through Carolyn on a daily basis. Now, Carolyn was one of these CEOs who wasn't on Twitter before she got her job. And so her marketing person had to sit down with her and tell her, give her a tutorial on how to use it. And Carolyn doesn't do everything herself, but she relies on the support of her marketing team. And as you can see, Save the Children's brand profile is that little green dot. That's the reach of their audience. But Carolyn's reach is that big pink dot. Why is it bigger when she only has 7,000 followers and the brand has 1 million followers? It's because she has all the influencers following her. Okay? So, I just want to ask, I know we started late, and should I end on time, or do I have a little bit more time?
A little bit long.
Okay, great. Okay, just wanted to make sure of that. Great, so let me show you another example. This comes from the Metropolitan Museum, a large organization. And the Metropolitan Museum had a reputation for being a little stodgy in the digital age, and they are now have made a commitment to becoming a networked museum. So their goal for the institution in using social media is to reach out to potential donors and visitors before, during, and after their experience at the Met, and to make sure that they have a fantastic experience there and that they use social to keep in touch. Now, their CEO is Thomas Gammel, and he thought Twitter had a little bit too much drama, and he was also an artist, and he's a great photographer, so he chose as his channel to be on Instagram. So his purpose is really leadership and engagement with his peers, while the brand audience is current and potential supporters. So let's look at the way that Thomas interacts on on Instagram. Okay, so he's sharing the world through his iPhone in service of the art. So this is a photograph of a painting that's in the museum. You can see that there's a lot of conversation. When he travels around and engages with professional colleagues around art, this came from the museum conference. They were in Detroit recently, and he's photographing a painting in the Detroit Art Museum, and again, a lot of discussion around it. He will talk about all aspects of what it takes to lead a museum. And this is a photograph of sort of behind the scenes at their big fundraiser, the costume fundraiser, which happened to have been sold out. He also uses a lot of humor. This is his dog. You saw the cat, there has to be a dog. And the picture there is the before and after. The dog got its grooming and now is all ready to go to the annual benefit, but unfortunately the tickets were sold out. And finally, he's human. And he's showing pictures of his son. This is his son from, happy birthday. His son's now 30 and probably mortified to see that photograph, but he's showing that, I'm not just a professional, I'm also human. And it's also a very engaging way to engage with the leadership at the museum around their work, around the institution's programs, and in a kind of authentic, personal way, all in service of the organization's mission. And finally, the last tip is about measure, learn, and improve. Now, we heard from Meredith about how they measure everything, and they know exactly what's working and what's not working. Here's another example. This comes from an organization called DoSomething.org. How many of you are familiar with them? Okay, so they want to get 15 million teens active on social media by 2020. And so they actually have 2 data scientists on staff. They're a small organization, but they've made a commitment to being data informed. So this is an example of a Facebook app that they launched. It's called Pics for Pets. They did some research and they found that there's a lot of animals being killed in kill shelters because there weren't enough photographs being shared online. So they launched this app that made it easy for teens to download and to go into a shelter, take pictures, post them on the internet, go in and volunteer or go collect supplies for the shelter. So they launched this app on the Today Show, and Kathy Lee had some puppies in her arm on the Today Show, and she brought the puppies on their head. Okay, no dogs were harmed in that. But what happened was it got picked up by bloggers and video bloggers, and somebody, of course, made a humorous video on YouTube, and a popular blog in New York picked it up. And you'll notice, if you read that first sentence, it's hyperlinked to the organization's landing page where people can get the app. So I happened to be in the office. I was shadowing their data scientists, and all of a sudden this broke. And the data scientists excused themselves, and they went into this conference room, and I was following them, taking notes. And what were they doing? They were actually looking at the conversion rate of the landing page, and they were coming up with ideas for the next iteration of the landing page in real time to get to better results. Now, of course, it wasn't all about promoting the campaign and getting people to download the app. There was a whole layer of outcomes leading on up to adopting pets. And these data scientists have done a lot of A/B experiments about what actually works. You see the photo of the dog. They tested whether, do we get a higher open rate in our email or a higher download rate if the dog is looking straight at us versus away from us. They tested different breeds of dogs. They tested different colors. So they could see what leads to conversion of these different outcomes. So this is what I mean about being data informed and using data to learn, measure, and improve. Okay, how many of you know who this guy is? Who is he? Okay, and what's the famous line? Okay, that's not a knife, that's a knife, okay? So here's what I say. That's not a spreadsheet, that's a spreadsheet. Now, what the spreadsheet is, it comes from Global Giving, and it's color coordinated with their logo, but the thing that's interesting about it, it's all of their social media, but it's one column is objectives, strategies, tactics, metrics, goals, and benchmarks. They do this every quarter, and it takes a little bit of cutting and pasting, a little data cleaning, and I said to their marketing director, is that, how much time is that, is that worth your time? And she goes, yes, because we save so much time because we don't have opinions about what works. We know what works. And finally, is the whole idea about learning from tracking, okay? Days accident-free at this facility, 0. Okay, another dog. Okay, so there's some organizations, and this gets to institutionalizing continuous improvement and inflection. Momsrising, which is an activist organization, what they do are things is something called a joyful funeral. Okay, so they've given them, they know using social, mobile, new tools, things aren't going to work. They're going to have brilliant ideas maybe the first time they do something, and it's not going to work. So they've given themselves permission to do a joyful funeral. So at a staff meeting, they'll say, is it time for us to give this tactic a joyful funeral? They'll say, yeah, okay, let's order the flowers. And they actually give the technique a formal eulogy. And in this reflection, they figure out the next iteration of the project. They also have a lot of discipline around their measurement. They do metrics Mondays. They have the whole team meet for 20 minutes a week to pull out and pull up their key performance indicators and their campaign for the week and figure out what worked, what didn't work. Very brief, right, document it, and they have that for the next time they do that campaign. So being able to track is important, but even more importantly is to be able to learn from your data. So in summary, so the tips are, remember that success in social and networks, it doesn't happen all at once. You have to take the right incremental step. Right size your strategy. Don't try to do too much. Be very intentional about what you're doing. Scale your organization's culture with a good social media policy and good leadership. Allow staff to leverage their passion for your mission. And go beyond counting your data and learn from it. So with that, I will, do we have time for a question or two? Okay, any questions? Great.
Let's give that.